So if I could welcome up Jesse, Will, Rob, and Rick, we will have our panel, our first panel on the metaverse. Come on up. All right, well, because we do want to keep on time here, so while Rob is miking up, we'll start here on my left here. What I would like you to do is to first introduce yourself, and then in your words, describe what is the metaverse.
Awesome.
Please, start.
All right, I'm Jesse Alton. It's nice to meet you. I'm actually one of the Fearless guys, and I'm the founder of Angel XR and OMI, which is the Open Metaverse Interoperability Group. I define the metaverse as the digital counterpart of the universe. So yes, it includes the internet. Yes, it includes VR and AR and gaming, all of it, including spatial audio. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you, Jesse. Next, Will.
Hi, I'm Will G. I've been working in metaverse adjacent technologies for the last 25 years, ranging from games to other things. Lately, I run a company called BaltiVirtual. We're based in Baltimore. And for the last 7 years, we've been building virtual and augmented reality experiences for a ton of different industries. I guess metaverse is something that's pretty broad. I think it's still taking shape. I'd say the most useful definition is thinking of it as the next evolution of what we've seen over the last 100 years of computing, moving from punch cards to command prompts to drag and drop to touch screens, and this evolution of computing where it becomes more human and becomes more like the real world. And so I think the metaverse is kind of the next step in that journey.
Rob?
Hello. So to me, the metaverse is actually more of an idea than anything. It's not one product, it's all of the products that you see out today. Virtual worlds, augmented reality worlds, video games. Video games were an early version of the metaverse. So that, to me, it's more of an idea than any one individual product.
I'm Rick Williams. I'm a game development consultant, and I've helped with metaverse projects. My definition of the metaverse is it's the next evolution of the internet. It's what we will naturally go to. There's not going to be a release date, the metaverse coming June 20th, 2027. Like everything is going to steadily evolve, and it will turn into a state of seamlessness between the physical and digital world. You really won't be able to tell the difference between them.
All right, thank you for the introductions and the overview of the metaverse. So the next question is really around what are the technologies. Will, you had mentioned that you work with metaverse adjacent technologies. So let's start there. Can you describe what those technologies are?
Yeah, I think at a low level, you're talking about 3D environments generally. So things that look and feel like video games, that's where I got my start. So 3D objects, 3D worlds. And so I think there are a lot of applications for these types of technologies today, even before the metaverse becomes a commercially viable place for everyone. And so that's, been making a career adjacent to the metaverse as it's been growing up.
Rob, what other technologies would you say form the metaverse?
So right now, when you think metaverse, you're kind of thinking virtual reality. And a lot of companies like HTC or Oculus are developing products to immerse you in this virtual world. So for now, basically right now, we have all of your VR systems, but I would also include AR systems in there, so augmented reality systems. Apple does a really good job with their AR kit for their platform, and that is truly bridging the gap between the digital and the real world, because you are placing digital 3D objects into real world situations. And ultimately, I think that is what the metaverse is really about, is to do that bridging between the virtual and the real world.
Thank you. And Rick, you are not only working with technologies, but you're actually building out some technologies in the metaverse. Yeah, describe that to us.
So we've got a platform that focuses on the photorealistic aspects. You may be familiar with projects like Roblox and VR chat, where there is technology that is limited by your processing power. So we've been experimenting with different technologies such as rendering on server farms and having interactive videos through a service called Pixel Streaming that is able to give you a photorealistic view of the world, but you're able to interact with it, and it's hardware independent. So all you need is the internet connection in order to get the video, and good enough latency in order to interact with it. So it's a developing technology, and figuring out how to work with it can really open it up to a lot of people, where not everybody has to have all of that expensive technology.
And one thing when it comes to technology, if you think about websites in the beginning, it was the Wild West. Everybody made websites, but then we started to get some standards for websites, right? And there's accessibility standards that you might have heard of. There's also, standards around access, right? So for kids under 13, there's certain standards. If you're working with health companies, right, and you want to change, personal identifiable information, there's HIPAA standards, right? COPPA's standards under 13. Well, the metaverse is not unique in the fact that it needs standards. And so, Jesse, you had mentioned one of the things that you're working on as far as those standards. Can you give us more information about how you can standardize the metaverse?
Yeah, absolutely. Standardizing the metaverse is obviously an extremely bold and tall task. So we don't claim to be setting all of the standards. I think, if anything, you'll wind up seeing 10 other groups copycat also claiming to be creating all of the standards. And this is actually the problem that we set out to solve. We realize that there's a lot of brilliant people out there who have solutions for interoperability across the metaverse. And if you want to be able to take an item that you won in one video game and take it with you into another video game, or even show it in augmented reality, you need interoperability. This is not always the most fun or the coolest parts of technology, but OMI formed as a collaborative effort. We are an open community, a W3C group, and we research with intent. The protocols that we put our stamp on come out after many painstaking conversations across many different platform owners, creators, open source aficionados, et cetera, that work together to create these protocols. And the competitive advantage of being a part of this open group is we see ourselves as nodes in something much larger, rather than all claiming to be the origin of the metaverse. So standards come from collaboration, and that's pretty much the only way you'll see standards get adopted.
Thank you. It is very, very important to have standards, because it is very much the Wild West right now. And I remember when we were talking before, I think it was maybe Rick or Jesse, one of the two of you said that there is only one metaverse.
That's me.
Okay, so Jesse, there's only one metaverse. What do you mean by that?
So it's you'll see some of the biggest companies out there stand to benefit from a bit of confusion. It's not diabolical, it's just going with what you know. So if you look at companies like Microsoft, who just made over a $70 billion acquisition in the name of the metaverse, but their CEO uses terms like metaverses, says things like Halo gets a metaverse, you get a metaverse, you get a metaverse. And it's easier to do it that way. It's basically the advent of creating new websites. That's really going to fractionalize us, and we're not going to see much progress that way. Truly, if you see yourself as part of the metaverse and accept that you can contribute to and pull from it, whether you have a path to revenue or not, whether you use blockchain or not, when you see yourself as part of the metaverse, I think that's the best path forward to actually seeing it manifest.
Wonderful. All right, so we're starting to understand some of the technologies. We're starting to understand that there's standards. We're starting to realize there's a metaverse. Let's now get into the use cases of the metaverse. So if we could just go down the line, Jesse, why don't you start with what is your favorite use case of the metaverse?
Oh my goodness. Let's see. So portals and inventory, and I guess it's not quite fair to say two, but they do go hand in hand. Being able to actually take an item that you won in a place, in a game, or an outfit that you designed, and being able to showcase it across multiple platforms, I think that's probably the most exciting of all, is really seeing what happens when you truly own your digital assets and you feel like your digital identity is just as intimately you as your physical or AFK identity is.
So you're a big advocate of then that avatar, and then not just having an avatar per world,
Right.
but the portability of that avatar.
Yes, our identity is so intimately wrapped up in the metaverse. I think that's what makes it so important that we're intentional in the way that we approach it and not just blazing forward as fast as possible to pump out something cool, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Move fast and break things.
Right. Although move fast and break things, right. Will, so on that note, what would you say is the one primary use case of the metaverse that you're super excited about?
Well, I'd like to pick two. Because professionally, it's business, commerce, moving. There are all sorts of use cases that are coming down the road. But personally, I think gaming, just the fact that you look at a lot of the metaverse platforms today, like Sandbox or Decentraland, and they sort of have roughly the same experience where you create an avatar, you pick a hairstyle, you make the clothes, and then you log in and walk around and sort of look at people and don't really have anything to do. And I think on the other side of things, you've got games like Minecraft, Fortnite, where kids are spending hours a day, engaged with friends, building relationships, and I think that reflects, that use case and that feeling that they get out of it, I think reflects more of the future of where this should be headed. So I guess gaming.
So would you say that Minecraft is a metaverse or part of the metaverse?
I think it could be. I mean, it really depends. I think there are some very narrow definitions of the metaverse. Tony Parisi from Unity has a very kind of structural definition. I think there's also this broader concept. So I think Minecraft probably shares a lot of the features of the metaverse. It's real-time 3D. People are interacting with each other. They're building structures. They're building relationships. And so, yeah, that feels to me directionally more like the metaverse.
And I think that's a good example too, because if anybody has been around the last 10 years, they all know Minecraft, right? And if you don't, I don't know where you've been the last 10 years, but Minecraft is huge. It's a great builder tool for building out whatever you want. That was actually our first go-to for building our office was Minecraft. But there's a lot of issues with Minecraft, right? Some of the portability, because they have different servers, whether you're accessing it from a desktop or now whether you're accessing from VR, but hopefully with the new Java version, there might be some connection there. But moving on, Rob, I know we're working on a new office together, which you might not say is the primary use case or your favorite use case of the metaverse, but what would you say is your favorite thing that you're excited about that the metaverse will bring us?
So I like games. I like video games. I play a lot of them. That is definitely a big part of it. But for me, anyways, it's more productive base, I guess. So it's bridging that gap between myself and my team, basically. So we have, at Mindgrub, employees all over the country, and it's hard to get everybody in the same place all at once. And so for me, I think what I'm looking for the most is being able to get my teammate, my team members, my coworkers together, and maybe not even in that professional capacity, maybe family. You might have family all over the country. Getting them to be able to be in one place together and have it feel more real than just talking to somebody on a flat screen or calling somebody on FaceTime or something like that. So I think that really to me is kind of what I'm actually excited about, is getting to feel like we have connection with people that are hundreds or thousands of miles away.
All right, Rick, primary use case for you.
It definitely builds off of what he's saying. I think that having an ability to have an expanded interactivity amongst interest groups would be absolutely great. If you've ever had an interest that you thought was kind of niche and you had a hard time finding the people who shared that same interest, you could easily be able to put into a search bar and enter into a world of people who share your interests. But then to be able to expand upon it. If you're into acrylic pouring, you can do a 3D video and have people join you in the space, and you can just be like, this is what I do and here's what I've worked on. In my case, game development, having something where you can find people who, for your team, can fill that particular gap that you need filled, and then something that would even be a productivity workflow, something that can ease your ability to collaborate with one another. Something like that can be woven into the experience and developed independently by the people who are actually utilizing the experience.
Yeah, it is that kind of experience, that shared experience, like a physical shared experience that's so important, that's driving us to move our office into the metaverse. And not only are we moving it there, but we're starting to lay out our new office in such a way that, the engineers might, flock to the Dungeons and Dragons room, the creative might, flock over to the topiary garden, right? But then if you have a meeting with creative, you have to physically walk over to their area. If creative has a meeting with the engineers, and it's actually Magic they play a lot of, not Dungeons and Dragons, but not unlike each other. But you have to go over to that, cave-esque portion of the office. And as you're walking, you walk in front of and you come up to other people and you can actually have a conversation with them. And I don't know how many people just feel how much we've lost going from Zoom to Zoom to Zoom to Zoom, because now generally my meetings are just with my leadership team. I really don't get to interact with the rest of the company, and it kills me, it pains me that I can't do it. But now in the metaverse, when we have our meetings there, as I walk across the office to get to the next meeting, I can actually chat with people again. I can get around that virtual water cooler and have conversations. I can throw a snowball, right? We can have that camaraderie that we have missed these last 2 years. So for Mindgrub, our business use case is very much to get back some of that high-touch camaraderie of our team by moving into the metaverse. There's a lot of business use cases, though. You probably saw the stories about McDonald's recently. So McDonald's now has a virtual McDonald's, and I knew this was coming. We've been talking about doing a little food truck module. We used to have at Mindgrub food trucks every week. We brought in food trucks, and we loved it. We'd stand around and order food, and we talked about having a food truck you could go to, and depending on where you are in the nation and what your integrations are, whether you're integrated with Grubhub or DoorDash, you go to the food truck, and when you walk up, it knows who you are, and it displays digitally, dynamically, that menu board of all the food that's available to you, right? You can order, and there's an interaction there. You order your food, and then it physically shows up in the real world using DoorDash or Grubhub. But it's a really nice interface. You've probably heard about McDonald's. Now they have a virtual McDonald's. And you can take a break from your game, and instead of having to go onto your app and go to DoorDash and figure out how to order your McDonald's, right? Instead, you can play your game. You can just take a little pause, walk into the virtual McDonald's, order your food like you would if you're in a physical McDonald's, but yet it does show up to your house via DoorDash, right? So there's some really, really cool tie-ins of the physical world and the digital world, and really good business use cases. So why don't we start? You've had a breather now, so why don't we come back to Jesse, and why don't you tell us about another really solid business use case that you've seen that's starting to transpire here?
Oh, good one. Okay. Which one? So digital land, right? Digital land is probably one of the most controversial topics in the metaverse. For the most part, I think the biggest and most valid problem with digital land is that it's artificial digital scarcity. And if we've learned anything from the Enrons of the world or the multi-level marketing business failures of the world, there are successes out there, we've learned that people get burned when they assume that they're going to consistently make more money by making an investment early. What we're starting to see is kind of a counterculture. I own digital land. I'm one of those crazy people who spent too much money on a digital property. And I love my piece of digital land, right? I'm comfortable with that risk that I've taken. But what we're starting to see is that barrier get lowered. There are so many people who still don't know what the metaverse is. My partner, Caroline, we've been together for going on 6 years, does not care about the metaverse. I've tried to put headsets on her. I've tried as hard as I possibly can, and she doesn't care. So what's going to happen when we start reaching people like Caroline or anyone that's in between the spectrum of where I am and where Caroline is at, right? We need to start meeting people where they are. So with digital worlds, you're going to consistently start to see more and more opportunities to have your own virtual space for cheaper and cheaper. And I think a great one to give a good shout out to would be Mozilla Hubs. It's a free place to build a space, works on a phone and any device. And no, I do not work for Mozilla. And number two, I can highly recommend checking out something like Crypto Voxels, which they do have the crazy expensive spaces, but they also have free spaces where you're able to kind of cut your teeth and become familiar with these virtual lands. So I think we're going to see accessibility and the access to the metaverse consistently become more and more available, and I think there's a lot of profitability in doing so.
Thanks, Jesse. Will, is there a business use case that you're starting to see businesses use the metaverse for?
I think there are a lot. I think the one that's going to be exciting in a little bit longer term, I think we need to have more users kind of in these worlds, but it's shopping and retail. I can't take credit for this quote, but somebody, I can't remember, said, Amazon perfected checkout and in the process ruined shopping. And so the idea of like there's no like touching, feeling, getting a sense of going to a store that's a destination, and kind of seeing the structural decline of the retail industry, and pandemic sort of poured gas on that. I think this idea of going to 3D spaces for events / retail, I think will be really powerful.
Thank you, Will. Rob, a business use case that you're starting to see?
So I'm actually kind of in line with that. The world of digital goods is expanding, and with a concept like the metaverse, you can now go above those physical goods and start dealing with digital goods. And NFTs are something that have been, gaining in popularity. Some people like them, some people really do not like them. But in these digital worlds, you're obviously going to have to or want to customize yourself, your land that you paid a lot of money for, or something. So having a marketplace, or but instead of it just being a list of products on a page like you see on Amazon, you want to buy a tree for your digital land, you go to a nursery. You want to buy a shirt, you walk into a digital store that has shirts hanging on racks, and you can interact with them, put them on, try new shoes, whatever. So that kind of digital marketplace, I think, is going to be really big, especially, and you see it a lot with video games now. Most video games nowadays are going to a free-to-play model, and where they make all of their money is customization. Little silly things like changing your hair color to green. Like, they charge you 50 cents to do that. People pay it. You can buy a horse. 2,000 in-game credits, whatever. But people are spending real money on digital money to buy digital goods, and I think that that's a really big thing that's going to be coming up soon.
Yeah, I kind of have a two-part with this. One, partially because it builds off of what they said with retail. But there's a critical element that's missing with retail that not everybody understands, but for some people it's very important. It's the social element. If you want to have a shopping trip with your friends, with mother-daughter shopping trip, something like that, you can't do that on Amazon unless you're sitting side by side. But you could easily do the shopping trip and be there with them and just be like, oh, check out this item. What do you think? And you can have that interaction. But the business use case that excites me the most, anybody has worked on a team and you're just like, wow, they want me to use another app, then you could easily have a workflow put together into one app that everybody can use, where things move step by step through whatever production flow you have defined.
So an actual visual representation of workflow.
Production.
Yeah, of production. Oh, very cool. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that one. The shopping, I think of all the time. One of the new concepts that you have is what's called like a digital twin. And so a really good example of a digital twin and why they're good, and this is not necessarily a metaverse example, but I heard some of the ski slopes out in Colorado have created a digital twin of the ski slope. And it has all the exact same positions of where their snow guns are. Now in that digital version, they can run as many weather simulations as they want against it. And every time they run a weather simulation, right, they can then figure out what's the optimal time based on the temperature, based on the wind, what's the optimal angles and time and the amount of pressure to put in their guns to maximize the snowfall. And so in this digital twin, they can run every single weather pattern over and over and over to get the best results in this digital twin very quickly. So then in the real world, when a weather pattern comes in, they know exactly, how to punch it in to maximize their snow. And now they can increase their basically usage by about 25%, in the season, because they can make that much more snow. Back to the retail experience, I thought that was a great example, saying that you can't, basically shop on Amazon with somebody else if you're side by side. The other thing you can't do is you can't try on clothes, right? But now in the metaverse, if you have a digital twin of yourself, right? So if you're honest and you basically can film yourself now in 360 degrees, and you can have an avatar that is your exact body shape, right, then you could go into a virtual store, and if the clothes are also digital twins of the real clothes, you can try it on for fit. You're not going to feel it as much, but you can visibly see how well the clothing fits. So there's a lot of enhancements that you can have in that retail experience. So as far as like ways to enhance the virtual world, what are other ways that you think the digital world and the metaverse, for that matter, is going to be able to enhance our physical world? Jesse?
Wearables is another, we can continue on wearables. Imagine, shoes, for example, that are covered in a material. We're starting to see more and more flexible screens. You're literally starting to see TVs that roll up. So imagine shoes that are made of a material that you can match it to what your avatar is wearing. We're also starting to see projects like metafabrics emerge, or actually, metafabrics is a more new economic layer. Sorry, I know too many startups in the space. We're starting to see other projects come up like Metafactory. Metafactory is a very cool one to check out. When you purchase one of their shirts or one of their physical wearables, you actually get a digital copy for your avatar as well. And then there's some novelty layer to that, but I find for myself, I'm actually more excited about getting the digital copy for my avatar than I am about getting the physical shirt. It just is kind of an added bonus that I know that physical shirt justifies the amount of money I spent.
Will, something enhanced
Something to enhance the physical world. Yeah, I think there's sort of, depending on whose definition of metaverse you go with, there's this idea of something called the AR cloud, which is mapping the physical world and being able to correlate all the data that exists out there and put it in place, put it where it belongs. And so, for instance, you could look up really how to do anything in the world on YouTube, right? Like how to change the air filter for a 1984 Datsun. You know, there's a video there, the guy will walk you through step by step. And so the idea of being able to overlay that on the actual 1984 Datsun that you're looking at and having step one do this, step two, and making like all of the information that is available and stored on the internet location specific and just more timely and efficient to access, I guess.
Yeah, actually, it's pretty deadly. But I've been looking at new cars. My car is about to die, and now on the websites, you can go in there and basically design your entire car, and it's gotten really creative. And it'll slap the parts on. You can spin it around, open the doors, climb inside of it, and now I can shop so many different car lines virtually that I can't really do in the physical world well. Right? You have to go to every single different dealer. Or CarMax, where it's a lot of different cars, but it's none of the new ones, right? Rob, what's something else in the physical world that is getting enhanced through the metaverse?
So if you think of the metaverse outside of just that strict virtual world where you have to wear a headset, augmented reality is something that is bound to help countless people from any, buying a pair of glasses, for instance, and putting them. I don't know if anybody's seen Free Guy. It's a very funny movie. If you haven't seen it, watch it. You can basically take a pair of glasses or something similar, put them on your face, and all of a sudden your entire world is filled with way more data, way more information. So maybe, going back to a shopping experience, you put them on, you can look at an article of clothing, it'll tell you like where it was made, what material it's in, all of those things. Even to going outside, driving a car, having a set of directions instead of having to look at the screen on your car and having it say like turn left or turn right. You put on a pair of glasses, your windshield on your car becomes that viewport bridging that digital and physical world, and it highlights the road and says go this way, or it shows you speed limit signs right on your windshield. That I think is something that is bound to be a very large part of how people start to transition from where they are into the metaverse and then beyond.
Yeah. With the AR tech, I think something like Wearable Wisdom would be good. So if you've ever bought a house, you've had a home inspector go through and check out the house, but maybe you have the experience that the inspector missed something. You could have AR glasses that as you go about your home inspection, it can actually be an inspector for you, and it says, here's the outlet, here's our things to consider with the outlet. You know, I see there's a tree in the yard. Are the roots going to go into the pipes? You know, things like this, that something that would take somebody a lifetime of experience and wisdom to garner, you can download this app and put it on and wear it and go through and be an expert in that moment.
Yeah, I love that we've transitioned from what was 3D virtual worlds to now how we're talking about how the digital world is getting overlaid into the physical world. Because I think there's a misnomer that people assume the metaverse, you have to have a pair of goggles, right? Like, you know, the Rift or HTC Vive, right? These are big, heavy goggles to get into the metaverse. And I think it's clear now that you don't go into a 3D world necessarily. It's really the merging of the physical and the digital world. So, you know, Rob's example of having a digital display on your car windshield, right? That digital display, all that extra information, that augmented reality, right, can also be a viewport into the metaverse. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have goggles and you have to go into it. I know we talked about what it's going to take to really become like a prolific technology, right? And so to really become prolific, there's some things that are needed, right? And we talked earlier about, you know, portability of your avatar, right? So you don't have an avatar unique in each of the worlds, but you can port that avatar. What are some other things that we're going to need, you know, in the metaverse to evolve so that it will become more prolific? You know, like everybody has a smartphone in their pocket, right? But I'd say there's maybe a handful of us that spend a lot of time in the metaverse. But it's going to get there. What are some of the other things we need to do so that everybody in this room is both in the virtual world and the metaverse, like having a phone in all their pockets? Why don't we go, we'll go from the other side now, Rick. I keep putting Jesse on the spot.
Oh, okay. I hope I don't step on your toes, but I believe that the interoperability is absolutely essential, because if you think about, I know that people who are in my industry who came before me tell me about the wonderful joys of having, you know, people who know how to use Windows systems, but then they encountered like the Apple Ethernet system. And you know, and they're just like, oh, well, this is very difficult to put together. If you can make it so that it is very extensible and moddable, that the world at large can start contributing to it, you will see an absolute swell of both use and investment. You'll get the best use cases. You'll get the easiest UXs out of that.
Excellent, great. Interoperability, Rob?
Yeah, accessibility is a big one, and making the technology to be able to participate in these worlds more accessible to everybody, not just the, you know, the people who are diehard gamers or, you know, somebody who's a real big techie, but your grandma. Getting your grandma into a, you know, into this, you know, world is that to me is going to be like one of the biggest hurdles that needs to be overcome. And I don't think technology is quite there yet. I think that the where we are today is still kind of stuck in that small niche of techies and game enthusiasts, but it is broadening. And with the advent of newer technologies like AR and making things, I mean, your smartphone is a great example. You know, who would have thought, you know, 15, 20 years ago that your grandma would be sitting on her couch, or your mom or your dad would be sitting on your couch or their couch and, you know, browsing Facebook on a digital device. Like most cell phones back, you know, 15, 20 years were weird, large, clunky things that only people who were really interested in that technology wanted to use. And now anybody, you know, almost everybody uses them. So I think that that's where the metaverse and where this technology needs to go. I don't think we're there yet, but I think it is getting there, and it's going very quickly.
Will, one thing we need?
One thing we need a critical mass of useful experiences. I think if you look at the way computers evolved, I think there's an old ad for the Apple II that was like, what are you going to do with this thing? And it was like, do your taxes and store recipes. It's like, it's not really the most compelling use case. And so what happened over time is, you know, it started in schools, it started with businesses using them for specific purposes, and then you kind of built this snowball up to a size where there were enough people using it for enough different things that were immediately useful to them, where then it just becomes ubiquitous. So I think It's going to be sort of a piecemeal type of thing, but I think that's what it's going to take is a collection of useful experiences.
That's a good answer. One of the books I love is called Crossing the Chasm, and they talk about the adoption cycle. And there's the early adopters, then you have a chasm, and then you have the early majority. And a lot of technologies don't make it into that early majority, right? They might be niche. Like if you remember the segways, right? And at one point, we thought everybody was going to segue everywhere. Now, I am seeing people scooter and one wheel and stuff all over urban areas now. That is definitely happening. There are no segways in there, right? Especially like in Baltimore, that'd be a lot of money to throw into the harbor, which happens with all of our other transportations. Anyway, it's very clear that the metaverse is starting to get over that chasm, right? For years, we had augmented reality, virtual reality. We had all of these technologies, but they were really the early adopters. So getting over that chasm is really nice. Now we're starting to get into that early majority, and I think it is going to stick. So Jesse, what is one thing that we need, though, so that we can get truly over the chasm and the early majority can really start using it so that eventually the late majority means that everybody's got it in their pockets, right? What's one thing we need?
It's a great question. We need to meet the early majority where they're at, right? I know I'm kind of echoing something I said before, but it's kind of like a three-phase part to this. We need to increase the amount of metaverse creators by either helping them upskill or sharing knowledge. We need to increase the amount of metaverse consumers by meeting them where they are and making them actually want to participate. Remember Caroline? And then we need to increase the synergy between the two, right? This comes in the form of platforms or products that connect creators with consumers. I think a major problem riding on this theme is that we've got essentially two options as a metaverse creator. You can die in obscurity with a single URL because you don't want to add it to a platform, or you can add yourself to the Facebook or Meta empire. And we need more options than that.
Great answer. Yeah, so we've talked about what is the metaverse, who's using the metaverse, what are the technologies, what are the use cases, both personally and business, what are the hurdles we have to get over so we can get to the early majority. We've covered a lot of things, but we have about 5 minutes left, and I want to give each of the panelists an opportunity to say a parting word, but I also want to give you a chance, if you have any burning questions, please let me know. We do have a mic set up here. If you're not a loudspeaker, you could certainly come to the mic, but is there any questions that you might have, any dying questions? Marty?
Let me come to the mic. So I only have about 300 questions, but I'll try to keep it to one.
One, Marty.
But before I do, we have over 200 people watching live stream, and some of them have asked for the opportunity to be able to ask questions. For those of you that are watching us live stream, thank you. You can send an email to myvoice@mdtechcouncil.com. Somebody will be monitoring that website, and you'll be able to ask questions that way. That's myvoice@mdtechcouncil.com. So my question, you've been talking about the metaverse as if it is a single thing. But at the same time, some of the slides have shown that there are multiple platforms. If you look at cryptocurrency, there was Bitcoin, now there's 10,000 cryptocurrencies. Are there going to be 10,000 metaverse platforms? And if so, somebody who wants to get into the metaverse, how do they pick? And are they all going to be interlinked to one another?
Yeah, great question. So do you want to field it?
Yeah, I was going to say that will not be, to me anyways, that's not how the metaverse survives. It can't be a fragmented system, and I think somebody else might have mentioned that before. Part of where these systems get their uniformity is from regulations and from, standards. And in order for the metaverse to, I guess, survive and last and get over that chasm, that needs to happen, because if there are 200-300 different, metaverses, it will nothing, you'll never take off. It's almost like your home assistant automation systems now. They're working towards unifying them, but they're not quite there yet. And so somebody looking to get into that marketplace is very confused, and it's a huge barrier to entry. And so until they basically unify what the metaverse is and get these standards and make them cross-compatible, That's really, that's really where it needs to go.
Yeah, Jesse?
I totally agree with that. And there's two options for having those standards implemented, right? There's the old school way of doing business, which is this space race model, eat each other alive and acquire each other. And I know there's probably some VCs in here that you make a living of doing that, so I'm not trying to say it in a negative way. It's an option. The second option is choosing to work together, right? And so if we choose to work together, then there's really not that same level of ego of trying to force other people as smart as you to bend the knee. And so I believe that the metaverse and the way that it's actually going to take shape, we're going to see more of that latter starting to take center stage. For once, we're going to see open source actually be essentially the better option. And maybe I'm just hopeful, but only time will tell.
Yeah, it's similar to the, even though Bush called it the internets, there is one internet, but there's thousands of websites that, form the internet and thousands of databases and all that. Metaverse, same thing, one metaverse, but there will be multiple platforms within that metaverse.
Yes.
Rick?
Yeah, so if you consider the metaverse the natural evolution of the internet, your metaverse space will be the equivalent of your website today. There may be key entry points. You may go in through Meta or Roblox or anywhere else, and you will be able to get to the other spaces in the metaverse from there. But ideally, you are not beholden to any one specific metaverse provider, one gateway source of the metaverse.
So kind of like content management systems, right? There's
Right.
WordPress and Drupal and Joomla and SharePoint, right? There will be multiple. Here's a couple right here. Sandbox and Roadblocks and Decentraland, right? They're all like content management systems, but they're different parts of the metaverse. Another question? There was one here.
Hi, RJ Martin from S-Twin Technology Group. As someone that's into gaming and unfortunately is getting older, I'm finding myself more nostalgic from games from the past, my childhood, which become inaccessible with each generation of gaming system that comes out. Do you think it's going to be viable within the metaverse? It's just an endless catalog of games from the past that were on past platforms.
Yes. I think that all media is happening that way. Think about film, music, anything. There's the things that are made aren't going away. There are thousands and millions of things coming out every year, and so it's going to become an AI problem, a discovery problem of what are the things that you would be interested in, and what's kind of the Netflix recommendation of, oh, do you remember you used to play this game, or things like that. But yeah, I think it's going to become way too much content for anyone to wade through kind of in a scroll view.
Yeah, good answer. And do you have a question sitting down there? Oh yeah, you were waiting patiently. If you could ask. And then the gentleman behind you, the last two, and then we're at time.
I'm a little short for this. Okay. So part of my question really has to do with training and development, because if you're going to be getting people into the world in the metaverse, you need to train them. And so I'm wondering, because, and this is I'm with Montgomery College, Fizi Halim. I'm trying to look at this from the perspective of, if someone has an affinity for art and actually is an artist, looking at how the people are viewed, the avatar looks, they may want to create something that looks more like the individual themselves. How do you recommend helping someone that's looking at the training aspect and getting involved in it from a career development side?
I feel like I'm talking so much.
Yeah,
but
go ahead.
You're asking good questions. So you're hitting the nail on the head on something that's often overlooked in the metaverse, right? We really talk predominantly about the business case or about the developers' jobs in actually coding this, but so much of what's going to make the metaverse successful and what really pulls at the heartstrings, right? It's that intimate part of identity, is the design layer and the art that goes into it. I would actually say that there is probably almost a majority of the folks that are in the metaverse are these designers and artists and creators. They're finding ways to digitize their pots and clay work that they're making and being able to sell it as a 3D NFT. They're finding ways to create flowy dresses that change color as they spin and move like you see in the movies. And so there are these opportunities. fundamentally, from an upskill standpoint, learn Blender or use a tool like Godot. These are open source tools. A lot of the biggest companies are starting to really fund these tools because of all the benefits that their folks are starting to see from it. But those are some really great places. And if you want to help folks become metaverse creators or designers, there is an open source effort. I have a personal interest in it, so I have to call that out. But there's one called metaverse.dev. It's an open source project that's kicking off on Monday. If you and your people want to help create it, if you want to learn from it, be a part of that, by all means, it's truly an open source effort meant to help artists become designers in the metaverse.
All right, real quick question, real quick answer, because I know we're 2 minutes over here.
Okay, I'm sure you're familiar with the National Institutes of Standard and Technology. I was part of the group that worked on standards for CDs, that kind of thing. I'm wondering if you guys believe that we're to the point where getting NIST to get involved with this and establish Metaverse Standards would be appropriate now, or is it 5 years away, or that kind of thing.
Yeah, Jesse.
Any and all of you.
Our standards guy, we got to give this one to you too.
Yeah, I think it's like, it's a fine edge to walk, right? Because it can be perceived as extremely arrogant to even assume that we're ready to be making standards. And I think that's why, at least the approach that we're taking is we're saying we're really trying to approach standards from an intentional standpoint and iterate. These are things that we talk about a lot at Fearless, Mindgrub, I'm sure a lot of our companies, right? Like iteration is critical. And so we're trying to make sure that we're not just blazing ahead, pumping out protocols to make it all work, which you have to be mindful of the systems that you're designing. So I think, yes, right now is the appropriate time to start, as long as we're doing it together, but we should always go into it understanding that we don't know what we don't know, and things are probably going to continue to change. So we need iterative patterns in order to ensure that it actually lasts.
Excellent. Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you.
Will, one last word about the metaverse?
Oh, I think we've said it mostly. I'd say just find a useful application. I think it's really going to start with what these guys talked about, this idea of almost like the meeting verse, like coming in to collaborate with each other, and just get your feet wet with the technology.
I like it, the meeting verse. Rob, parting word?
Give it a shot. You might be apprehensive, but I would say, if you go through life not, trying things, then you'll be bored. So give it a shot.
All right, just try it on. And Rick?
Yeah, the standards are definitely driven by use case. But yeah, if you look at the world and whether or not it's ready for the metaverse, you look at a lot of the younger people nowadays, when they get up, they don't want to go out, they want to log in. They are ready to just, experience the world through a digital lens, and now is the time to build it.
All right, well, thank you very much, Rick, Will, Rob, and Jesse.